Welcome to our Leadership Dialogues, where we focus on reimagining financial services. We have been exploring topics around reinvigorating payments, refreshing customer journeys, and rethinking the ecosystem. Today, we continue to discuss how organizations can remain competitive and innovate by harnessing the broader ecosystem. More specifically, we will look at this from the perspective of a VC firm which finds and supports companies that help to solve problems for financial services institutions, thus helping to further evolve the ecosystem. My name is Lucine Tertullian, partner in Baringa's Capital Markets practice, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Mark Beeston, a partner and founder of Illuminate Financial. Welcome, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me today, Mark. Perhaps we can start by introductions. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and also Illuminate Financial?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me here, Lucine. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. So as you say, I'm the managing partner and founder of Illuminate. Illuminate is a purely financial markets technology focused venture investor. So we invest in both fintech and enterprise tech that ultimately targets the large financial services institutions within capital markets, asset management, and the wealth management space. I founded the firm 7 years ago. We're investing from our second fund, and our investors include industry names such as Deutsche Börse, IHS Markit, Barclays, and JP Morgan, amongst many others. We are on the ground. We're London based, but we're on the ground in London, New York, California, and Singapore, and we run a really industry connected model, which I'm sure we're going to spend a lot more time sort of talking about when we talk about the challenges of crossing the chasm between the world of what we'll call fintech and those end users. For myself, Illuminate's the fourth thing I've done in my career, and fortunately I've experienced in my four roles time as the consumer or frequent non-consumer of technology. I've been the entrepreneur, I've been the operator, and I've been the partner. So and I've been the funder. And effectively, I spent the first half of my career at Deutsche Bank on the fixed income derivative trading side. I joined as a graduate. I left as chief operating officer, firstly of their global rates and global credit franchises. Signed DB up to things like clearing at LCH when it was a lot less important than it is now 20 years ago, and left to go to the entrepreneurial side of the street to set up a post-trade processing firm in 2005. Built that over the course of the last 4 years. Learned a lot about how difficult it is to actually sell those kinds of solutions back to managing directors like myself at a bank, which again we will touch on, and ultimately we sold that business to Intercontinental Exchange in the end of 2008, and I then went to ICAP for 4 years, where I was also on the Exco and ran their post-trade and information business, including helping establishing their corporate venture unit within my division. Doing the TriOptima acquisition, investing in Acadia-Soft in the collateral messaging space, et cetera, before ultimately leaving to set Illuminate up.
Wow, great career and great experiences, I guess, to bring into this. So thanks again for joining me. So just, I guess, in terms of to summarize some of the market context as well, we know that financial services institutions need to adopt new technologies, new solutions to remain competitive and compliant, but it can be complicated and expensive to build all of this capability in-house, and partnering with a specialist organization is becoming more and more widespread, and some might say actually critical to success. However, with so many entrepreneurs, FinTechs, Big Techs, RegTechs out there, organizations can struggle to filter and identify the best companies or partners that are fit for purpose. Just to build on Illuminate Financial's proposition, could you tell us a little bit more about how you help to bridge the gap? How do you select which emerging solutions and companies to invest in? How do you then help financial services organizations select the best partner that can make a meaningful difference to the company's outcome?
Yeah, sure. And actually, I think it's in our core DNA because I think, to the journey that I was kind of personally on, sort of experiencing, how difficult it was as the small guy to make the large institution kind of hear your message, at the right moment. We really kind of baked the lessons of that into the Illuminate model. So, Illuminate basically exists because, 5 years post-crisis, I'd sort of realized all the things that you had just said. The macro operating environment had changed so much that a total refresh of the technology infrastructure was going to be necessary, not because of technology, but because we'd seen huge industry deleveraging and we'd seen massive regulation and we'd moved into a zero tolerance compliance environment that necessitated new solutions. Now, you have to assume that all these new solutions are reaching out to all these potential users. And actually, we also see that all of these potential end users, increasingly have set up their own ways, whether it's labs or heads of innovation, and there's some evolution of that to try and find those earlier stage solutions. But in most cases, they were kind of largely missing each other, and that's because if you're a startup and you reach out to a very large bank, or 20 very large banks, you're having 20 different conversations, and your 19 competitors are having 20 different conversations at 20 different moments in time with 16 different people across 5 different geographies, and the chance of actually finding the person that owns the problem in the organization at the moment that the organization is ready to solve the problem that you're addressing is almost infinitesimally small, right? And so what we did when we launched Illuminate was we actually launched an industry partner program where, as ex-practitioners, we could actually serve up that smorgasbord of fintech opportunity. And let's talk about the scale of that. We've seen about 4,000 companies, even within our narrow niche at this point, to end up investing in about 25, right? The top of the book is 300, 400, 500 companies that are enterprise ready or close to enterprise ready to solve the problems the industry has, if only the two sides can find each other. And so our industry partner program allowed those industry partners to sign up with us under NDA, share their problems at the point of pain, and have us kind of serve up our market landscape. So a great example right now, everybody is caring about the institutionalization of digital assets, right? Should we be running digital asset trading? Should we be doing crypto trading? What's the infrastructure that's missing? It's everything from market connectivity, best execution, reporting, obviously custody, and actually, interestingly, that's for a business space that was actually by definition set up to be natively digital, yet it's missing all the institutional components for true institutional adoption. So we're getting a huge amount of industry engagement around that landscape view right now. And what we're doing is we're sitting almost as a broker between the two sets of supply and demand. We're listening to our partners, both formal and informal, as to what their needs are. And then we're connecting them to what we've seen, irrespective of whether we have invested it, whether we might invest it, whether we've decided not to invest in it. Right, and that, of course, is a really virtuous cycle. It's giving the entrepreneurs the connectivity that they want. It's giving the industry institutions, a scalable connection to that entrepreneurial world. And of course, it's making us hopefully a little wiser as potential investors as we kind of pick up info and intel through that process.
It's interesting you mentioned digital assets as one of the kind of macro trends. Are there any others that you're seeing that you think organizations really should be thinking about and investing now to be fit for the future?
Yeah, so, well, firstly, it's not just about investing. The way we kind of look at the world, we say, look, there are probably like 5 things that an organization could want to do with this world of fintech, and it's investing. I know you're using it in the broadest sense, but obviously, it's adoption. It could be partnering to deliver the solution, channel white labeling through to the end users. It could be investing. It could be acquiring. It could simply just being aware to have a better understanding of the art of the possible, right? But either way, you still need that, awareness for any of those outcomes, right? If I think back to Fund One, that we were kind of doing the initial deployment from 15 to 18, fixed income electronification was a major thing. The future of the desktop was a major thing. Risk mitigation and a lot of the RegTech and compliance needs were major vectors. They haven't gone away. The industry is still solving those. But I think the new ones in Fund Two for us, we didn't do a single blockchain investment in Fund One because at the time it felt like it was a technology looking for a problem. The institutionalizational needs for digital assets, right, has now become a very meaningful thing. So that's definitely a major vein for us. Obviously, ESG impact and carbon and its role within financial services is another major one as well. And then a lot of the rest is kind of continuation of themes. Data in all its forms, of course, right? Right the way from finding alpha through to data management, monetization, permissioning, privacy, and many more.
How do you see different banks approaching this innovation agenda? You mentioned the use of innovation labs in some of them, but what kind of spectrum do you see?
I'm actually pretty excited about where we've gotten to after a period of time. I used to be quite skeptical of a number of those kind of innovation initiatives. Pre-COVID, everybody loved flying their management team over to the West Coast to suck up the innovative culture, and I just think that's innovation theatre largely. I used to make the joke that in many cases the head of innovation role existed so that there was somebody in the organization that was about as disconnected from the organization as the average early stage entrepreneur is. And I think what we've actually seen over the last couple of 2 to 3 years is much more of a applied innovation agenda rather than a innovation theatre agenda. So it's not window dressing now. It's like, how do we actually make the rubber hit the road? I think we've also therefore seen an evolution of title. Like there are a lot more digitization roles rather than innovation roles, right? And it might feel like an odd nuance, but actually I think digitization is about delivering solutions that modernize your stack, right? Whereas innovation is much more sort of theoretical. And I think, where we see the innovation agenda still attached to an innovation label being most effective, and I think our partners at Barclays and our partners at JP Morgan have both been very good at this. It's really where it's aligned to the business, right? It's not happening in some remote lab in California, or in some trendy hub, but it actually, it needs to really exist alongside the business and service the business. Well, whether that's the front office, the middle, or back, it can't be a disconnected ivory tower.
Yeah, I think you made a really interesting point around concept theory versus practical implementation, and quite often that's where the challenge or the difficulty comes in. It's not to come up with the objective, the strategy, the target, but it's actually how do I deliver on this in line with where my business is going, with all the other priorities that as a bank I have to deliver.
Sorry, I was just going to pick up on that. I mean, I remember having a conversation with the CEO of one of our investors. We were having lunch in his office, and he asked myself and my partner, what are the big technology trends? This was literally maybe 3 years ago. What are the big technology trends that you're seeing? And you'd expect the answer to be AI or RPA or blockchain, because that's the hype cycle stuff that the industry was kind of talking about. And my partner said, well, actually, it's big data management and cloud migration, right? And now, it feels almost like an asinine answer, because those are things the industry has been talking about for 10 or 15 years, right? But that cloud migration is really only just starting to happen, at the enterprise level, and there are a whole bunch of challenges around it. So, we have to really separate industry hype speak from where we really are in the practical implementation cycle.
Yeah, no, I agree. Mark, I think my final question relates to any advice you might have for young entrepreneurs in emerging fintechs in terms of building these innovative solutions. What do they need to focus on to be successful?
You've got to focus on getting your product adopted, and that's going to sound ridiculous, but one of the biggest challenges I actually think early stage entrepreneurs face is actually getting that initial connectivity to an institution that is interested in them. And you get approached by megacorp, right? And megacorp are like, oh, you should sign an NDA with us, and you should come into our lab, and we should, you're gonna benefit from our IP, and that's great, but it's not paying to keep your lights on. And that organization is actually only giving you a very, very, very tiny fraction of its organizational capability, but they're consuming all of your resource, right? And so time and time again, you see organizations fall into this trap of dealing with a large organization because it's very flattering, but not getting to the commercials out of that organization. And it's not about the scale. It's about getting them to show that they will pay you for a small POC, and then they'll move to the next stage, and then they'll move to a production contract. And it doesn't need to be the biggest one, but it needs to keep your eye on keeping this relation commercial rather than just a flattering IP engagement, because these organizations will suck the lifeblood out of you, and then you'll go, how did we end up having all that great engagement and then we couldn't get funded?
On that note, thank you for taking the time to talk through us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to future conversations.